Ava Monroe never expected the job market to break her spirit. But after 43 unanswered applications and one Craigslist interview where the CEO turned out to be a cat, yes, an actual tabby on a velvet cushion, she was ready to accept anything with a paycheck and a pulse. So when the email arrived, crisp and corporate, bearing the subject line, "Offer confirmed Wolf Global Inc., her heart leapt. She remembered applying for a junior PR assistant role there. It wasn't her dream job, but it was real, stable, and most importantly, not a cat scam. Her mother cried on the phone from Ohio. Her roommate squealed and danced around their tiny kitchen. Ava, meanwhile, bought herself a single $6 latte as a celebratory splurge. The next morning she dressed carefully. Cream blouse, navy slacks, the same pair of black pumps she wore to her college graduation. Hair tied, nerves coiled, she stepped into the lobby of Wolf Global and nearly forgot how to breathe. Marble floors, gold trim, the kind of air-conditioned silence that smelled like power and consequences. A woman in a blazer that probably cost more than Ava's student debt greeted her with a smile. "Miss Monroe? Right this way." Ava blinked. "Wait, shouldn't I go to HR or—" "No need," the woman replied. "Mr. Wolf prefers to meet directly." Mr. Wolf, as in Damien Wolf, the Damien Wolf. Ava's palms went clammy. Why would the CEO want to meet a junior PR assistant? But before she could ask, the elevator doors closed, sweeping her up to the top floor. She barely had time to process the gleaming corridor, the glass walls, the skyline view before she was ushered into a room where half a dozen people in suits turned to look at her. And then, him. He stood at the head of the table, tall, sharp in a charcoal suit, hair slicked back, jaw tight. His gaze sliced straight through her. "This is her?" he asked, not bothering to hide his skepticism. The assistant beside him nodded. "Yes, sir." He looked her up and down, slowly, coldly, then gave the smallest nod. "She'll do. The press release is in 2 hours. Make sure she's prepped." Ava's mouth dropped open. "I'm sorry, what?" No one answered. Instead, someone slid a folder across the table, a contract, her name already typed, next to his, Damien Wolf, Fiancée. Her pulse kicked into her throat. "What the hell is going on?" she whispered. He met her eyes, unreadable. "You accepted the offer, Miss Monroe, and I don't do second chances." The silence that followed his words was suffocating, like the air itself had thickened. Ava stared at the contract, her brain refusing to process the black letters neatly printed across the header. Engagement, agreement, non-disclosure, classification. Beneath it, her name, typed clean, already official. "There must be a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "I applied for a PR position assistant level, I think. Not this, whatever this is." Damien Wolf didn't flinch. He merely adjusted the cuff of his sleeve. A small, practiced motion that screamed control. "Your resume was rerouted to my team due to a clerical error. However, your background and appearance are acceptable." His tone was clinical, like he was reading off a grocery list. "You'll be briefed on your role. The announcement goes out today." Ava opened her mouth, then closed it again. What kind of alternate universe had she stepped into? "You're asking me to pretend to be engaged to you, for the press." It wasn't a question. Damien finally looked at her, really looked at her, and something flickered in his eyes. Not warmth, not apology, just calculation. "I'm offering you compensation for the inconvenience." 3 months. Clean exit after that. $100,000 up front. $200,000 upon completion. No intimacy required. The room spun. She hadn't even paid off her student loans. Her mom's second surgery wasn't fully covered. Her part-time coffee shop gig barely kept her in rent and ramen. But this wasn't real life. This was corporate madness wrapped in polished shoes and gold pens. "And if I say no?" she asked. He didn't hesitate. "Then I call PR. They release a story about you attempting to impersonate someone in a high-level security zone. You'll be blacklisted in every firm from here to Boston." For a man who didn't raise his voice, he certainly knew how to make her blood run cold. Ava stood there, heart thudding, trying to remember how she got here. Just a few weeks ago, she was working part-time at a campus cafe, juggling her last semester, trying not to let the weight of the world crush her spine. Her mom's cancer had returned quietly, aggressively. Insurance was a joke. Life was unfair. Ava learned to smile anyway. Her friends said she was the sunshine of the group, always cracking jokes, always positive, but inside, she was tired. Tired of scraping by, tired of pretending not to be scared. When the graduation ceremony came, Ava didn't even go. She spent the day sending out job applications, wearing pajama pants and an old hoodie with coffee stains. She was smart, capable, creative, but none of that paid bills unless someone took a chance. And now, someone had, just not in the way she expected. She looked back at Damien, who was already checking his phone, completely unbothered by the chaos unraveling inside her. He didn't ask again. He didn't need to. Ava glanced at the contract one more time. She wasn't stupid. This wasn't a proposal, it was a transaction. Cold, strategic. And yet, some part of her, the exhausted part, whispered, 3 months. Fake smiles. A 6-figure paycheck. She picked up the pen. The pen clicked once, then again. Ava held it between her fingers like it might detonate. Across the table, Damien Wolfe didn't so much as blink. His stillness was surgical, like everything he did had been rehearsed down to the way he adjusted his cufflinks or pressed his thumb briefly against the corner of a page before flipping it. 3 months, he repeated, as if time were just another negotiable variable. You'll live in my primary residence, appear with me at designated events, say as little as possible to the press, smile occasionally. Ava stared at him. You make it sound so romantic. He didn't smile. Of course he didn't. This isn't romance, Miss Monroe. It's risk mitigation. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Ava signed. An hour later, she was in the back seat of a black car that smelled like new leather and judgment. Her bag sat awkwardly on her lap, still half unzipped, her phone charger dangling out like a white flag. She had no idea where they were taking her, no idea what came next, only that she had agreed to become a professional lie, dressed in high fashion and public smiles. The penthouse was ridiculous. That was her first thought as the elevator doors opened directly into the foyer. Marble floors, glass walls, the kind of space that didn't just say money, it screamed legacy. A silent woman in a dark uniform handed Ava a tablet. Your schedule for the week, Miss Monroe. Ava blinked. What? Media training, personal styling, a joint interview with Mr. Wolfe on Friday. She opened her mouth to protest but caught sight of her reflection in one of the glass walls. She looked like someone pretending to have control. Hair slightly frizzy, blouse wrinkled from the car ride, eyes wide and uncertain. Ava straightened her shoulders. Fine. She could do this. She'd done theater in college. She'd once performed an entire monologue about Greek mythology while her heel snapped off mid-scene. If she could survive that, she could survive this. That night, she didn't see Damien again until dinner, or what passed for dinner. He sat across from her at a glass dining table, scanning reports on a sleek tablet while a chef, an actual chef, served plates of food Ava couldn't pronounce. You're not eating, he said without looking up. I can't tell if that's an observation or an order. That got a brief glance from him, the closest thing to amusement she'd seen. You'll need energy. The next few days are demanding. Oh, good, she muttered, because pretending to be someone's fiancé isn't exhausting enough already. He set the tablet down. You agreed to this? No one forced you. You threatened me with media annihilation. That wasn't a threat. It was a reality check. Ava leaned back, arms crossed. Do you always talk like you're quoting from a law textbook? Do you always make everything harder than it needs to be? They stared at each other. Not hate, not anger, just two people circling something sharp between them. The next morning, Ava woke up in a bedroom bigger than her entire college apartment. The sheets smelled like lavender. The closet looked like it belonged to someone named Gigi or Kendall. Her name was printed on a schedule beside a tray of fruit and coffee. Ava didn't remember anyone asking if she wanted any of this. The first public appearance came sooner than she expected. A benefit gala. Ava wore a deep green dress tailored to perfection, her hair pulled back into a sleek bun by a stylist named Marco, who hummed Rihanna songs while curling her lashes. Damien met her at the elevator, dressed in black on black, no tie, watch perfectly centered on his wrist. He didn't compliment her. He didn't need to. His gaze flicked over her once, just enough to make her skin buzz. You remember what to say? He asked. Yes, she said tightly. Smile, say nothing, nod like a bobblehead. He didn't react, but she caught the corner of his mouth twitch. At the gala, cameras flashed like lightning. Damien's arm around her waist was steady, rehearsed. Ava smiled. She nodded. She laughed at things she didn't hear. But somewhere between the third glass of fake champagne and the 100th handshake, she saw it, people watching them with curiosity, with envy, with expectation. And for a moment, she wondered what it would feel like if it were real. Back at the penthouse, she kicked off her heels and threw herself onto the couch. Damien walked in minutes later, already loosening his cufflinks. You did well, he said. Ava snorted. Wow, high praise. You didn't embarrass yourself. That's your bar, she said, sitting up. Do you ever say thank you? Only when people exceed expectations. So never. He paused. You exceeded mine. Ava looked at him, really looked. Maybe it was the lighting, maybe it was exhaustion, but for the first time, Damien Wolfe didn't look like a billionaire carved out of cold marble. He looked tired, human, and that terrified her more than anything else. Because pretending was easy, but starting to care? That was dangerous. The following week was a whirlwind of interviews, fittings, carefully orchestrated appearances, and endless flashes from camera lenses that never seemed to blink. Ava played her part. She smiled, she stood where they told her, laughed at the rehearsed lines Damien delivered with just enough warmth to seem real. But it was all theater, exhausting, glittering, soulless theater. Yet, every now and then, in the quiet moments between events and silence-heavy car rides, Ava caught something beneath the surface of Damien Wolfe. Something unpolished, like the time his hand accidentally brushed hers in the car and he didn't pull away, or when she sneezed during a photo op and he subtly shifted so the camera wouldn't catch her awkward expression, or the night he found her in the kitchen at 1 a.m., eating leftover tiramisu in her robe, and instead of lecturing her about sugar and schedules, he simply poured her a glass of water and leaned against the counter in silence. He didn't speak, but he didn't leave either. It was strange how someone could be so cold in public, yet unexpectedly present in private. Ava wasn't sure which version of him was real. Maybe both, maybe neither. One evening, rain tapped gently against the windows, a soft backdrop to the jazz playing through the speakers. Damien stood by the bar, fingers wrapped around a tumbler of whiskey. Ava sat cross-legged on the couch, sketchbook balanced on her lap, pencil moving absent-mindedly as she tried to capture the line of his jaw from memory. You're left-handed, he said suddenly. She blinked. Yeah, so? It's rare, he replied, taking a sip. Only about 10% of the population. She looked up, amused. You memorize hand dominance statistics now? I pay attention, he said. The silence that followed was oddly comfortable, not filled, not forced, just there. Ava turned a page in her sketchbook. "Can I ask you something?" He didn't move. "You can try." "Why me?" she asked quietly. "You could have chosen any actress, model, influencer, someone polished, someone who knows how to play this game. Why pick a broke grad with no media training and questionable shoe choices?" Damien didn't answer right away. He walked toward the window, watching the city flicker below. "Because you weren't curated," he said finally. "You didn't come with PR baggage, old scandals, or an agent. You weren't part of the industry. You were, untouched." "Untouched?" she echoed, raising an eyebrow. "That's a weird way to describe a person." "It's not an insult," he said. "It's rare and useful, especially when everything else in my life is constructed." Ava closed the sketchbook. "That's the saddest thing I've heard all week." He turned. "Is it?" "Yeah," she said. "Imagine living a life so scripted you have to hire someone just to make it look real." He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was lower, slower. "I was engaged once, years ago." Ava's heart skipped. What happened? "She used me," he said simply. "Or maybe she used the idea of me, my name, my access. Her father was a senator. The engagement boosted their image. Until it didn't. Until I said no to something they wanted. And she chose them over you. She never chose me to begin with." Ava stared at him, not the billionaire, not the CEO, just a man who had been publicly discarded and quietly broken. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Don't be," he replied. "It was a lesson. People are investments. Some yield returns, some drain you. That's a very business way to view relationships. It's the only way I've learned to survive." For once, she didn't argue. She just stood and walked to the bar, poured herself a glass of water, and sat beside him. Close, not touching, just enough to let him know she was there. He glanced at her. "You're different." She smiled faintly. "I get that a lot, usually by guys right before they ghost me." That almost earned a smile. Almost. That night she couldn't sleep. She wandered out to the balcony, the wind teasing the hem of her oversized sweater. Below, New York glowed like a constellation, vast and uncaring. She wrapped her arms around herself and stared at the city she thought she understood, the life she thought she wanted, and the man who was quickly becoming harder to pretend around. A moment later, the glass door slid open behind her. Damien didn't speak. He simply stood beside her, silent again, the way he always did when the night stretched too long and the mask slipped just enough. She looked at him sideways. "Do you ever wish it was all simpler?" "No," he said, "but I wish I hadn't learned to expect the worst in people so early." That, more than anything, felt like a confession. Ava didn't reply. Instead, she reached out and wrapped her pinky around his. Small, childish, sincere. He looked down at their hands, didn't pull away, and in the hush between thunder and sunrise, something unspoken passed between them, something fragile, something real, something neither of them was ready to name. By the end of the second month, Ava had memorized the layout of Damien's penthouse, the password to the security elevator, the exact way he took his coffee black, 1 cube of sugar, no cream. She'd also memorized the tone of his footsteps, the way his voice lowered just slightly when he was about to say something that mattered, and the way he sometimes looked at her like he couldn't decide if she was a disruption or a relief. They had become something that wasn't quite friends, wasn't quite strangers, and definitely wasn't what the contract described. Somewhere between shared silence and accidental confessions, the edges of their roles had started to blur. She stopped asking what was real. He stopped pretending he didn't notice her laughter. The gala at the Astoria was supposed to be routine, another public appearance, another display of unity for the investors and media. Ava wore a floor-length black gown with an open back, her hair swept up, her eyes lined with quiet defiance. Damien wore midnight blue with silver cufflinks, his expression carved from stone. But when he saw her walk out of the dressing suite, he froze for half a second. His eyes swept over her, not possessive, not cold, just startled, as if he'd seen something he wasn't prepared to want. "You clean up well," he said finally. Ava rolled her eyes. "Careful. One more compliment, and people might think you like me. Let's not get carried away." But the corner of his mouth betrayed him. The event was a blur of crystal chandeliers, clinking glasses, strategic handshakes. Ava played her part perfectly, smiled when needed, touched Damien's arm at the right moments, even leaned in and whispered a joke that made him actually laugh. Not a smirk, a real, brief, quiet laugh. She felt powerful in that moment, not because of the dress or the diamonds, but because she had made the most untouchable man in the room forget himself for a heartbeat. Later, when the crowd thinned and the music softened, they slipped out the side exit. Damien didn't speak as their car pulled away from the curb. He didn't reach for his phone. He just sat there, watching her like she might disappear. When they got back to the penthouse, she kicked off her heels and walked barefoot across the marble floor, her dress rustling softly behind her. Damien followed her with his eyes, not moving. "You've been quiet," she said. He nodded once. "You looked different tonight." Different good or different fire the stylist? Different real. She turned to face him. "Damien, what are we doing?" He hesitated. "We're fulfilling a contract." "Don't," she said. "Not tonight. I need you to stop being Damien Wolf, the CEO, and just be something else. Honest, human." He took a step closer. She didn't move. "What if I don't know how?" he asked. "Then learn," she whispered. He reached for her hand, slowly, carefully, like he was still afraid she'd vanish. She let him. His fingers were warm, calloused at the tips, surprisingly gentle. He pulled her toward him, and she didn't resist. Their faces were inches apart. "If I kiss you," he said, "there's no going back." "Then don't stop," she said. The kiss was nothing like she expected. It wasn't desperate or rehearsed. It was quiet, intentional, full of all the things they hadn't said. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The next morning, Ava woke up wrapped in a comforter, sunlight slipping through the glass walls, the scent of coffee in the air. Damien was already dressed, sitting on the edge of the bed, reading his tablet. But when he looked over at her, his expression softened. "Morning," he said. "Hi," she murmured. "Was that against the contract?" "Yes," he said, "but I'm willing to breach it." They laughed. It felt too easy, too good, until the call came. Ava was halfway through an omelet when Damien's assistant rushed in. She was pale, holding a tablet with trembling hands. "It's been leaked," she said. "Someone sent the press internal photos, ones of you two at the penthouse, the garden shot, the one from the hallway." Damien's jaw clenched. "Who?" "We don't know, but it's everywhere now. Headlines are calling it the romance hoax of the year." Ava stared at the screen. Her face, his, captured in soft focus, mid-laughter, mid-touch, moments that had felt private, real. She stood up, her appetite gone. "So now they think I'm just some paid actress in a show." "That's what you were, remember?" Damien said too quickly, too sharply. She turned to him, eyes burning. "Was I? Is that what this still is for you?" He didn't answer. That silence was louder than anything he could have said. She left the room, packed her bag, didn't cry until the elevator doors closed behind her. The car ride away from the penthouse felt colder than the February wind pressing against the windows. Ava didn't look back, not once. She clutched her bag to her chest, heart thudding, like it hadn't quite figured out how to beat without him beside her. She told herself this was the right choice, that what happened between them, whatever it was tangled in obligation, in illusion, in a contract neither of them should have let slip. But when she got to her friend's apartment and lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't stop hearing the silence he left behind. It wasn't just the absence of his voice, it was the absence of what could have been. She tried to work again, opened old projects, replied to emails, smiled during client calls, laughed at her friends' jokes, but there was a quiet ache under her skin, like something important had been pulled out and nothing quite filled the space it left. Days passed, then a week, then two. She didn't hear from Damien. No texts, no messages, no surprise knocks on the door. It was as if he'd folded himself back into the version of him that didn't feel, that didn't try, that let people leave and didn't stop them. And maybe she should have expected that. Maybe she deserved it for believing the kiss meant more than impulse. But some nights, when the apartment was quiet and her phone screen glowed too long in the dark, she still waited. Just a little. Damien, meanwhile, was a storm contained in a tailored suit. He didn't miss meetings, didn't flinch when reporters asked questions, but his team noticed the tension behind his jaw, the way he no longer corrected people when they called Ava his fiancée, because correcting it felt too final. He spent late nights alone in the penthouse, eyes fixed on her last sketch, left forgotten on the kitchen counter. Her signature was in the corner, small, crooked, real. Then one night, while sitting in his office, a call came through from the board. They were pleased. The campaign had worked, investors were satisfied, the company's reputation had stabilized. "You can drop the charade now," one of them said with a chuckle. "No need to keep pretending you're in love." Damien hung up without responding. Later that same night, he walked into his study, opened the drawer where the original contract lay, and took it out. He stared at the paper. All those clauses, signatures, legal guarantees, so much effort to keep things clean, simple, distant. He tore it in half. Then again. Then again. The next day, Ava received a small package. No note, no return address. Inside was her copy of the contract shredded. Beneath it, one single page, written by hand in black ink. It read, "I don't want a deal. I don't want terms. I don't want a version of you that's edited to fit the narrative. I want you messy, real, and completely off script." Her hands trembled. Her throat tightened. For a long time, she didn't move, but that evening, as the city lights blinked through the window like tiny answers, she found herself standing at the base of the Wolf Global Tower. She didn't text, didn't announce her arrival. She just stood there, in the cold, waiting. Damien came down himself. No assistant, no driver, just him, coat unbuttoned, hair a little less perfect than usual. When he saw her, he stopped, completely still. "I read your letter," she said. He nodded. It was overdue. She stepped forward. "Why didn't you fight for me?" His jaw tightened. "Because I was afraid. Afraid it was too real. Afraid if I reached for it, I'd ruin it. I've built my life on control, Ava. But you made me want something I couldn't schedule, couldn't negotiate." She looked up at him, eyes soft. "You're an idiot." "I know." Pause. "I don't want to be your fake anything," she said. His face shifted, breath caught. "I understand. I want to be your real everything." That broke him. His arms wrapped around her like an anchor, like if he let go now he might lose everything he just found. She pressed her face to his chest, breathing in the only thing that had felt like home in weeks. No more lies, no more pretending, no more contracts. Just this. 3 months later, on the same date the original contract was supposed to end, Ava returned to the penthouse, but this time she didn't knock. She used the key he gave her 2 weeks after that night outside the tower. The place hadn't changed much, still neat, still quiet, but there were signs of her now. A yellow mug drying on the counter, a sketch pad left open on the coffee table, a pair of mismatched socks forgotten under the bar stool. Damien didn't complain about any of it. If anything, he started leaving his own chaos behind his jacket, on the back of a chair, his watch charging beside her phone, his books interspersed with hers on the shelf. He wasn't trying to keep his world sterile anymore. He was learning how to live in color. That evening, when she walked in from a gallery meeting, the apartment was dimmed, candles lined the hallway, and soft classical music filled the air. Her heels clicked against the floor as she followed the trail up to the rooftop. Damien stood there in a dark sweater and slacks, no tie, no pretense, just him, waiting. Behind him, a small table with 2 glasses of wine and a velvet box sitting open. No audience, no cameras, just a man who used to live by contracts, now ready to risk everything without one. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing slightly. "You're not doing what I think you're doing." He shrugged. "Depends. If you think I'm proposing without a legal clause, without a timeline, and without a backup plan, then yes, I am." Her heart did something strange, skipped, maybe, or melted. She looked down at the ring. Simple, understated, her. "You sure?" she whispered. "I've never been more uncertain about anything in my life," he replied. "And I think that's the point." She stared at him. The man who once said love was a liability, now choosing her without a safety net. "You know I'm still messy, right? Still unpredictable. Still probably going to eat tiramisu at 1 a.m. in your good robe." He stepped forward. "I wouldn't want it any other way." She took the ring, slipped it on, slowly, purposefully. "Then I guess this is yes." He pulled her in, arms tight around her, forehead resting against hers. No words, just warmth, just real. Because sometimes the best beginnings are the ones you never planned for.